Welcome back to another episode of Leading Beyond the Spreadsheet, the leadership podcast for analytically minded leaders who want to balance their technical expertise into embracing and excelling with the people part of work. I'm your host, Chris Liebau, owner of Action and Ease Coaching and keynote speaker. I have two wonderful women joining me today in the studio, Betsy Salkind and Amy Warshawsky. We are going to talk about improv skills and leadership. Betsy, Amy, great to have you here.
We're very happy to be here too.
In my programs and on stage, I often share the yes and game, which is a popular thing in improv, and it can be adapted to the workplace to help unlock conflict and generate creativity. And I often have audience members ask me what I think about the idea of leaders taking an improv class, to which I always say, why not? Before we get going in our conversation, I'd like to give a quick introduction on Betsy and Amy. Betsy is a board certified health coach. She holds a master's from the Sloan School of Management at MIT and was a Federal Reserve Bank examiner. She served as associate director and lead mentor coach at the Adapt Functional Health Coach Training Program and currently maintains a private practice. A professional stand-up comic and former TV writer, Betsy toured with a professional improv comedy troupe called Guilty Children and taught improv at Emerson College, MIT, AMDA, health tech companies, group homes, and more. Improv for Coaches combines her two great passions. Amy is certified by the International Coaching Federation as a Master Certified Coach and by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. She was a mentor coach for the Adapt Functional Health Coach Training Program and is a SAGE business coach and assessor in addition to maintaining a private practice where she works with individuals and teams. Amy brings 12 years of expertise in movement and mind-body techniques to coaching, as well as 15 years of experience as a director of community events and communications. She holds degrees from Cornell University and Northwestern. Together, they offer individual, group, and corporate team training and workshops developed around experiential learning. They also offer a variety of continued educational courses, including those approved by the International Coaching Federation and the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching for continuing education credit. Their book, Coaching with a Twist, Improv for Coaches, will be released later this year. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, kicking things off, what are the benefits of improv for leaders?
Well, I think there's sort of two ways in which leaders use improv. And one is the formal way, the practice of improv, which is what we can help people to do because it really is something you can practice and play with. But the other aspect of it, we're all kind of doing it all the time. And if you are a leader, you are improvising all the time. We never know the set of circumstances that are going to happen. We're responding in the moment to the circumstances, to the people that we're working with. And that improv mindset, I think people probably hold a lot more than they know. Just that attitude of, I can figure this out. That's the improv mindset. And then what we do is just a very deliberate way of stepping into a space to play and to practice with improv skills in a way that releases us to see, hey, what else is possible here in a situation where the stakes are low, and in a way to really level the playing field and get to do this with other people that we might not otherwise play with in this way. What would you add, Amy?
I don't know if I would add anything. That was really good, Betsy.
I improvise.
I might emphasize that element of it being a practice. And I think it's an ongoing intention of being able to show up in a certain way. And I think leadership is a practice. There's no one space that you are necessarily landing in and staying there, because so much is happening. So the idea of really honing your skill set within a framework of improv on an ongoing basis is about staying flexible in life and being able to manage yourself on an ongoing basis in a way that leaders really need to.
Yeah. So, Amy, you used the word flexible that I picked up. Betsy said play. I'm an analytical person, and Betsy also said like the figure it out part. And to me, figuring it out is like
Right.
spreadsheets and flowcharts.
Yep.
So, what's that fun and play and flexibility look like? Right? How do I break out of an
Mhm.
Excel cell?
Right. Well, I first of all love a spreadsheet. I mean, I think in terms of spreadsheets, and so I think of it as more beyond the spreadsheet instead of out of it, because I think a spreadsheet is really cool. And one of the things I love about it is it's organized. It's a way of organizing things. When we are doing improv, there's a lot of structure to it. It's not just, okay, let's play. There's no rules. There are rules. Um, there are fields, if you will. So there's, what are we going to play with? How are we going to play with it? And it's almost like a, multi-dimensional spreadsheet in a sense, because we're stepping into that space of what are all the possibilities in this moment. And we're doing it with other people.
You said the structure part, and when we talked about this
Mhm.
before, when I think of improv, my first reaction is to that, like, oh, well, we're just going to make it up and go.
Right.
Though there's this structure part of it. So, what is the value of structure, and how does that translate into improv and leadership?
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that most people like games is because there are rules. We know what the rules are. And then within that rule set, there's freedom to explore. Um, I think when there's no rules, and then it becomes overwhelming and distressing. So I'll give an example of what we might do in the improv to share what those rules might be. So if we have something we call 3-word coaching or 3-word conversation. And in that, it might be the coach and the client, or the leader and their employee, or any two people really, but they get 3 words each back and forth. So, and that's it. so you have to really think about, what am I trying to convey to this person? And what are they trying to communicate to me? And so that's the restriction, right? The game is 3 words each back and forth. But then within that, it is incredible how much you can communicate with other people and what you can learn from having that restriction. And it's also time restricted. So you're not having a 3-hour conversation. It's probably like 5 to 7 minutes. And we also have a lot of games that sort of lead up to that. So which group activities that help to start to hone and work on succinctness.
So I think what Betsy is also pointing to is building on one topic or skill at a time. So in that case, we're talking about succinctness or presence or internally processing as opposed to externally working everything out. All very much leadership skills. Particularly, I think the internal processing, really being able to see what's being said to you and respond to it succinctly, is what we're going toward, and it's almost like a funnel. So we're giving you a structure to be within, so that you can be comfortable honing and focusing in on one individual skill at a time. Then we bring them all together after time.
I hear structure over and over again, and it just lights up all the neurons in my brain. I'm like, yes, I love structure and those expectations.
Mm-hmm.
How can improv help people asking for a friend where
Right.
you can see me sitting here stumbling, trying to get it out? The thoughts are swirling and they're going so fast.
Mm-hmm.
How can improv training help the delivery and connection when we have that overthinking mind?
Mm. I'm going to say that by playing with those restrictions, so, you're having an experience where you have to do, like, how can I say this in 3 words, for example?
Mm-hmm.
When you have been doing it, you know internally what it feels like to do that and what the impact is on the other person. You become aware of how it works in a you can do it on paper, or you can watch it or listen to it, but actually doing it is many, many, many times more effective and more impactful, because you're experiencing it in the conversation, you're testing in real time what the impact is, and you have you can adjust. So it's a way of learning this and building your own confidence in your ability to do these things.
Yeah, kind of in the way when somebody asks me a question and I sit there and say, okay, the short version, or it's not
Mm-hmm.
an essay question, setting that context so that I have a framework for delivery is what I think I hear you say.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of when we first started doing 3-word coaching many years ago, and I was first learning to play with it with Betsy, or 3-word conversations, they felt, even though they were 3 words each, big and unobtainable. And now I can drop into the spot and do one with no problem whatsoever. And it feels very natural to me. And so there's that element of the more you practice, the more you try it on, the easier it becomes over time. And even those things that are you're being confronted with and you have to respond to, there's a way to practice that kind of response by doing improv.
And the point isn't to be able to speak in 3 words at a time.
Are you sure?
I am. Yes. It's really to kind of experience how little we actually need to say in order to communicate, and how much story is maybe unnecessary. I think there tends to be a lot more story than is needed much of the time. And that communication is happening in a lot of other ways besides the words that we're using, except, of course, in writing.
Yeah. In an earlier conversation, you made a comment that we overcomplicate communication. I'd love to hear more about that.
Aim, do you want to take this one first?
I think that it's human nature to think too much. And there's, if you think of it on a spectrum, there's the spectrum of those who have a tendency to communicate a lot. The minute that something's given to them, they're going to throw out everything that they're thinking. And then there's the very held individual that will only offer a little bit, or might feel less confident, or maybe the person who's speaking too much feels less confident, and that's the reason they speak too much. And there's this coming together of those two sides and finding your way more towards center, where communication can be much simpler and it's clear why you're choosing to say what you want to say at any given time. You're coming into a choice around it, as opposed to the reaction to over communicate or withhold and under communicate. And I think it's the process of thinking or not thinking that complicates communication. And this gives you an opportunity in all sorts of ways. How do we ask the questions that we ask? How do we reflect what we're hearing? That practicing those things, those skills, in isolation allow us to get really good at finding that center.
And I'll just add, I think one of the things that really complicates communication is assumptions. We make a lot of assumptions about, we assume the other person understands what we mean when we say certain things, or we think we understand what they want to know. And asking questions can really clarify a lot of that. So maybe we don't need to share as much as we share. We want to find out more specifically where the gaps might be. And so in many ways, it's helpful to, with whoever we're speaking to, whether it's one person or a team, is to really get clear on what we are talking about and what our agenda is, and go from there.
So how do you get that clarity in the succinct part? To me, that extra talking could be context.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out what's that method of dialing down in or getting a feeling of where that balance is appropriate.
What I think about when you ask that question is the different skills that we focus in on. Interruption, information sharing, the many, we call it new directions, but the many directions you can go in any particular conversation based on who an individual is. They'll choose whether to ask a question or reflect, or when you practice those pieces in different ways, and you play with them, and you give yourself space to kind of just try things on and not be so serious. You're outside of the moment when you're speaking to the board, and it matters what you ask, what you say, what you share. And you're more in a playful place, then you get to experience and understand, this is how this falls. This is the impact I'm making. This is not the impact I wanted to make. And so it's that space of playfulness that and experimentation that sets you up for success in the important places, the meetings, the boardrooms, the all hands on deck type of meeting where everyone's in the room and you have to know what you're sharing or not sharing.
Yeah.
And
So I'm hearing a lot of, go ahead, Betsy.
Well, I was just going to give an example of, so if somebody who works for you comes in and they say, I'm really having a problem with this task. And if you just start suggesting all kinds of things, it's a good chance they've probably tried 3 or 4 of those things already. And so, it's like, well, that won't work because of this, and this won't work with that. But if you just spend a little bit more time finding out, where exactly that problem is, or what they've already tried, you're going to have a much more productive conversation with them.
Yeah, it makes me think about the importance of set and setting, and really having intention around what kind of conversation are we having.
Right.
The Gottman Institute talks about a stress-reducing conversation, right, for partners, and the idea behind that, right, is just one person at a time gets to talk and kind of do the download and dump, and the other person isn't trying to fix them and their problems or anything else, and that you can avoid a lot of conflict with your partner when you know that we're in a stress-reducing conversation. So having, again, that set and setting about what type of conversation is this that's going to be productive. Back to the rules, I guess, and the structure that you guys were talking about at the beginning.
Exactly.
Well, even in a coaching conversation, not even in all, what makes a coaching conversation a unique conversation and coach-like is that there's a focus to the conversation and agenda. So the coach is exploring with the client, what do you want from this conversation? What do you want to walk away with? What do you need to explore here? And so similarly to what you're talking about with the parameters around Gottman and rules and structures, this is a structure that we give to a conversation, which I can say I use in almost every conversation that I have now, except maybe the light ones where I'm out to dinner with friends and it's really understood that we're hanging out and chatting back and forth.
It's hard to be curious if you're not present. So in that space of curiosity, many things are possible, and we are in a good position to make choices and to first of all enjoy where we are. But it's hard to be curious and afraid at the same time.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, think about that for a minute. That rings true. The analytical side too, a lot of the people that I work with, they're in environments and it's go, go, go. And we're fixing problems and we're troubleshooting and things are really fast paced. And sometimes you have to flip that switch to slow things back, to pump the brakes a little bit in order to create some of that space and intentionality in that conversation, because we're jumping in to fix problems all the time. And believe it or not, people don't like to be fixed. Come to find out.
Yeah. I don't.
For sure.
Well, I'm thinking about the analytical thing, Chris, because I think there is this sense that things involving people or play are somehow not analytical. But I think what we do really is, and it really came from a place of us. We were training coaches. We noticed that they were very nervous and very serious, and they were in their heads. They were sort of thinking, am I doing this right? I'm not doing it right. And kind of having an inner monologue and not really alive in the space with the other person. So really the Improv for Coaches was designed to address that, to help people to become present, to learn how to listen, to learn how to be there, and to learn to become confident that they had the skills they needed. And then it was really designed very specifically around what are the skills that we need to have to do that. And then we made games to learn and practice those things. So there is a lot of analysis, but it's hidden.
It's actually very tightly, I don't want to use the word controlled because I don't think that's the right, but managed. So within the sessions that we do, time management, how much time is allotted for each section of the session, the exercises that we're choosing, the games that we're doing, why we're doing that. So really serious analysis around what will help people get from where they are to where they want to be in their ability to communicate. It's actually quite striking. I know that for me, for example, time management is more challenging. And Betsy really taught me the value and also how to manage time with a group of people. And so it's become a skill that I've developed over time. So important for meetings. So many people have meetings that go on for an hour and nothing gets accomplished. And so here's a structure that teaches us how to have X number of people in the room and accomplish everything that needs to get done.
Yeah. So again, having some structure and boundaries around thing and really creating containers and intentional space to make sure that we're seeing that progress. It's not just a free for all.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that I think about, I've worked with a number of engineers as a coach. And I'll always be told, oh, they're different from you. They're engineers, so get ready. And then they'll come in and they're like, I'm an engineer. I think different. Get ready. And actually, it's quite relaxing the way that what I find when I'm in a conversation, they are quite organized. They're usually quite organized in their thinking, not to put them into one specific boat. I get how they approach things. I like the analysis. It's interesting. And so it's kind of what I think of is also there's a space within improv for people to really appreciate that everyone shows up with something to offer.
One of the things we talked about before, and I feel is a challenge in having some of these honest conversations that really impedes curiosity, is attachment. Having attachment to a particular outcome or a particular solution.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help support people that have that high level of attachment?
Well, I'll take a stab and then Amy jump in. I think that's really what coach training gives us, because as the coach, we might reflect something or offer something to the client, and they get to do whatever they want with it. That we really are trained and offered the space to let go of our own need for a specific outcome. That it's really a co-creation. I think in a business context, there are outcomes that are needed, but there isn't necessarily only one way to get there. And so I think that's where the letting go is probably going to be around, how can we do that? How can we do that in a way that's more fun? How can we do that in a way we haven't thought of before? So yes, and, which I think a lot of people know of, is really about that. It's, okay, what else is possible here? Or what's good about this way? And what can we add to it? So there's, I think it's helpful to have an outcome, right? And you can't get around that at work. But we can play with how we get there. We can play with how much it costs us to get there personally and financially and in other ways. And we might get somewhere beyond where we were originally setting out to go.
I was also thinking about humor. So
Work's not supposed to be fun.
I think in general people take, and if you're leading a portion or a multinational company, let's say, then there is some quite serious, and as Betsy said, outcomes that you're seeking. And I think to be creative, to be able to improvise, innovate, work with others, there needs to be a space where there can be humor, a more relaxed energy, a releasing of all those expectations. That's just what happens when you do improv. You really get used to, there's no one who's an expert in the room. Everyone really starts to have a conversation with one another, based on the work, based on whatever it is that we're working on at that moment. And one thing I was going to say is one of the things I really love about the work that we're doing and the way that we approach it is we don't come in and tell people, here's what you need to get out of this. We say, okay, here's the exercise, go do it and come back and tell us what you got out of it. And there'll be a lot of repeats. We'll hear a lot of the same elements, and then we'll hear new things that they got out of it that we might not have ever heard before. And so it's really coming from them. It's true experiential learning.
I'm just kind of laughing, thinking about it doesn't really sound like I don't want to say that there isn't a PowerPoint presentation that goes with that, because there is structure and setup and timing. I know that there's a run of show, but I was just kind of laughing about so how do you put together a PowerPoint for that?
Yeah, we don't.
You don't.
And
exactly. Yes.
One could. And we've actually seen other people do it. But, we like to leave the structure unseen. We're guiding people through an experience, and they are figuring out the meaning of it. And, part of where this came from was my own boredom at lectures. I get bored just listening to someone talk, even if they're great. I want to do it. I want to experience it. I want to feel it, and never been interested in rhetorical learning. I wanted to experience it, use it. So it really does come from my own way of learning.
Thinking about some final closing thoughts and putting a bow on here, I'd like to. I know I feel like we could just go on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
I'm not done yet.
Perfect, because I was going to say, right, I'm like, here's my microphone. I wanted to hand it off to you ladies to say, if there's what would you like to say to inspire people who are considering growing, exploring improv as a way to help them get there? Right. What's your, you get to stand on your soapbox and put it out there to make a case of this experiential exploratory opportunity to practice things and to have that framework to bring those tools back into the workplace.
Well, one thing that I have learned is that there's improv comedy. And I think that people think of improv as you have to be funny. And this is meant to be very funny. And there is, for example, for those of us who grew up on Saturday Night Live, there are times where improv is incredibly funny. Improv, though, doesn't have to be. And so there's this whole world of using this and doing this. Like Betsy said, we're doing it all the time. That really heightens our ability to be in any moment and respond, for lack of a better word, well, or respond from a place of choice or riff of something that's being shown to us. So yeah, improv comedy can be very funny, and improv is really about being able to show up in a moment, really present, and respond in the way that you want to say, I responded well.
Beautiful. Betsy.
And I will say, I think the humor, everyone has humor. We might have different sense of humor. And I think playing in this way invites people's humor in. And I think no matter what you're doing, bringing your humor in is helpful. It's bonding. It's, and I've taught improv or facilitated improv in lots of different environments and with different people, from people who are professional comedians too. But one of the most fun experiences I ever had was with MIT students, none of whom had any interest in a career in comedy or theater. They were mostly engineers and mathematicians and scientists, and they were so fun, partly because they had no interest in that. They were doing sophisticated math humor, and it was really fun because there was a confidence that they had in their own skills and their own skill sets. And then they just saw this as an opportunity to explore and to, hack something new, if you will.
Yeah. Awesome. Amy, Betsy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. For the audience, if you would like to learn more about improvisation for your organization, please visit their website, bamentorcoaching.com/corporate-team-coaching. We will put that in the show notes for you. Again, Amy, Betsy, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to yes and you and say it's BNA mentorcoaching.com.
Oh my gosh. My apologies. I appreciate your correction. Okay. Thank you, ladies. To our viewers, we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Chris.